Story begins and we see a very vast desert, and around it, huge mountains stand like guards, and the winds move among the sand dunes while she carries with her forgotten stories and echoes of events that could never have happened. And in the middle of this difficult atmosphere, a deep and strong voice cuts through the silence that you can feel. Coming from another world, he says that above the sand that seems not to move, there is a hidden gate between heaven and hell, a point. You find that the natural laws there break down, and death there is not necessarily the end, according to the myths whispered to people by. They can live in this place, in an old community of the Brotherhood that guards this place, for generations living in the shadows and away from eyes. Ordinary people, so that they prevent the cursed spirits from returning after death and harming the living, because these beings do not sleep. And don't forget and don't forgive, and this is the real problem. Because their presence makes the world a never-ending circle of suffering and persecution. And first, this sound begins to fade, the scene changes slowly, and we see a young man from the area performing strange rituals while remaining silent. Animal blood is poured into a deep well, and darkness, and as soon as the liquid begins to flow down the walls from inside, this young man gets worried when he takes out of something he saw from afar a lone knight, coming closer and driven by instinct to survive his life. He left the place quickly and running returned home. He hid in the basement underground. At that time the lady of the house, a woman whose heart had toughened from the harshness of life in that strange atmosphere. Wait, someone is approaching. She immediately grabbed an axe and stood in front of the door, being very cautious. And when the knight finally arrived, the sound of hooves was heard. The horse was very strong as it was pounding on the hard ground, and as soon as it stopped in front of her, it was clear that it was carrying an unconscious man on it. The horse. The man's body was limp as if he was already between life and death. And despite the worry that was apparent, the woman clarified that she knew this man well. And I allowed him to enter without resistance, and I took him to the storage, and there the knight got off the horse and put the body on a wooden table, and without any frequency of holding the axe and separating the head from the body is in an ugly scene, and this is between chips. His might. No, this also shows his experience in the subject. As if this is a normal, necessary procedure in the world. The mess they are in. And then suddenly, the whole story shifts to a disturbing scene of a woman. You are being harassed by two evil men. Their cruelty shows how much morality has gone bad in the place. This reinforces the idea that danger is not but from the dead. This one is also from the living. Then the scene changes again. The area is much drier. It has a railway cutting through the desert, as if it were a metallic wound, and there is a man standing there who looks very tense, wearing an iron collar around his neck, and this shows he is a slave to a cruel master. And in the background, in a dead tree hanging the remains, human corpses, and in crows they sit and eat. At its own pace, the scene is like an ugly painting representing the fate of anyone who fails in this world. And after a few minutes of tense connection, three characters dressed red, riding a train, tearing through, spat on by a servant who doesn't speak, and their clothes show that they belong to a religious group or a particular sect. But the weapon they have shows their faith. It's just linked to violence. And when they stood in front of their leader man, it appeared immediately, not it's just from his stance, but from his terrifying appearance, because his mouth was stitched and his eyes were unnatural. It shows that he has no conscience or humanity. And as soon as he started, he talks. The man asked about where his friend is, while he actually knows he is supposed to be with two others. And when he found a meaningless reply, he noticed that something was not right. He realized that there was an extra horse, more than there should have been. He pointed at the horse, and the man grew bigger for admitting his mistake, and at that moment, the crows suddenly flew as if they sensed the presence of something invisible. Everyone turned their attention to the tree, and there they saw the knight sitting in silence. He doesn't move and is very focused, and at that moment we know that his name is Tarawi, the hunter of the dead, whose reputation preceded him and reached these men. And when do you think he killed this commander before? So, it is clear that those who are standing are no longer human beings. Normal, without giving me a chance to talk. The confrontation started but didn't take long because Al-Tarawi moved at an incredible speed and precision and took out all three. Before they could do anything, their leader, he is kneeling, trying to say that the goal he is searching for, he won't find it. But his words to him were empty and hoarse. He replied to him with the utmost grief and dislocated his spine and his head with a terrible strength, and he finished what was. He is supposed to not exist in the first place, and then he clarified that in this world, the only way to ensure that these creatures do not come back is to decapitate them, and this has become the basic rule. To survive, the story then moves to a village where there are prisoners gathered under armed guard. And in the prison, he tries to convince an officer of his worth. And it also has a treatment that cures diseases. And it expels the dead. And among the prisoners was Jenny, who woke up, and she is continuous but showed an extraordinary personal strength. When she resisted one of the guards and stole his knife, she stood strong. And this caught the attention of someone named Fa+, who continued to watch her with interest and caution, and realized that she was not just another victim. And after hours from waiting, and when everything was going, the sound of gunfire in the execution, he suddenly appeared and appeared. He narrated on a rock and finished these men accurately. In the middle of this commotion, Fafa Plus started shooting, and Sabo escapes while the other prisoners. They were arrested again, including Jenny, and after how much? A minute P+, I do not hesitate, and they thanked and acknowledged that he became indebted to him, and when he asked him how he could return the favor to the hunter, he said to him, "Does he know what he will be asked for?" And like that, a partnership of interest and necessity began, and in the background, the prisoners had taken the place as isolated, and there, a sect preparing for rituals they call divine justice, and when they arrived at the place, it became obvious that the spiritual leader of this group was more depressed. He is a priest whose vision is sharp and whose speech is measured. He commanded the people he considers pure to pray for the spirits that will be sacrificed, and he said, "This act is not cruelty, it is purification, and an attempt to save them from eternal torment." When these words are repeated among the followers, the prisoners stood before. A man introduced himself in the name of Gaza, and he is an officer. He says that God chose him to help this sect in a mission to cleanse the land, and it seems he wasn't. There is no mercy. On the contrary, there was a strange conviction, and he really believed that people's deaths were mercy, and when their deaths were announced, it would be a sacrifice. You will bring the blessing. To what extent? He is a strict leader. But Jeannie saw that this man had a past full of sins. I stood up to him without fear. I cursed him and exposed his hypocritical, shaky air. He said that he is no longer the person he used to be back then, and that his actions now are by orders divine, while Al-Sisi tried to intervene and ask for a fair ruling. But Gaza shut down the discussion and said that his word is the only law here. And at that time, inside one of the tents, there was a man with muscles, and his body had strange deformities, as if his skin was attached incorrectly. He asked the servant. He brings him clothes while he is nervous and giving orders. And the servant is walking, a woman from the dead appeared to him. From the midst of darkness, a mule attacked him, and I used sharp blades to deform before they are skinned. What? And then she gave this whip to the man because he wears it like a catcher, and really his clothes have become his shape. Terrifies, and at that moment you realize that this is Kaiza, the central character in this horror nightmare. And when he came out of the tent with his new face, he and his friend started slaughtering the men of the law who they exist in cold blood, and finish them completely. Strength and speed as if they are used to the scene. Yes. And when they finished, he called for other people's money. And this revealed that he controls these creatures. And after a few hours, he reached a village that was completely destroyed, burned houses, broken doors, and an eerie silence showing that there is no soul there. So he and Plus, who was with him, kept searching. He covered answers for this view and didn't explain anything. All he did was put a belt on a weapon as if he is preparing it. There is no escape from it, and he goes back to understand what's going on. The young man fell into a hidden hole in the ground, and indeed they immediately closed the door on him and isolated him. He left him alone in a dark and narrow corridor underground. And in the cell phone, it chokes. He heard a sound from afar. It began to rise until it appeared. One of them suddenly died, and it attacked him ferociously. And so to survive, he fired shots and they hit the creature, but the tension did not end because it was clear that there were other dangers in the place. After a while, Ravi appeared from a side corridor and was watching the young man's performance. He gave an order and used Edo el-Shamal as a kind of harsh practical training, and when you see the dead man walk, he stood up again, and this shows clearly what creatures. This is not giving up, and at that time the residents of the center more and act more accurately and shoot again. And he got rid of an enemy and he entered he will learn by force. From the one who it happened to, and when they returned to the roof, I met another narrator. And what this is money as an initial payment, and they said there are still other rewards when the work is finished, and this confirmed that their relationship was based on material things only. And despite that, Fa Bell will continue, but I asked. The narrator is the one who makes him chase these monsters with all this rage, and then the hunter began to tell pieces from his past, and he said that the story began. People didn't consider it purity, and she was pregnant during a very difficult time, and a group called the Consecrated Sisters who guard the secrets of death took her. And because the place was not suitable for the children, I sent them to an orphanage, and he grew up there with no one until he was expelled, and he was 1 year old. And he was forced to live alone, until a widow took him in. Her and her daughter took him in, and this was the first time he felt that he belonged somewhere, and over time, the feelings between him and the girl turned into love. Their relationship became so strong as if it could stand in front of the whole world. And in a moment of neglect, he left her. She went out. Alone at this moment, cruel men found her and torture her, and he insulted him, and this shocked her. She ended up giving birth to the baby, and he is on because he couldn't bear the pain and guilt. He left the place and went away, and he returned years later to discover that she had died while giving birth, and no one followed her except the child who no one wanted. This loss ate his heart and made him seek revenge on all those who have. He got involved in the matter and broke into an isolated prison and finished them off, including Benza and his men, without anyone knowing what he had done. It will have consequences far beyond the world of biology. And going back to the present and the time when it appeared in Plus, they continued on their way. Giza and his followers were spreading terror intense. They kill people they skin, and their faces to distort themselves. And this, between the obsession of the sick, how he announced that he is looking for a blessing for his son, and what appeared. His body is tied in a triangular frame and wrapped in cloth like a mummified corpse, and when a request to know the location of the consecrated sisters among those who move, and not just by force. No, it's also despair, and when he couldn't respond in time, he ordered the execution of prisoners, which added to the atmosphere of terror. More and more, and at this time and in a place Again he will go back to the house he was in. The first one came with F+, and they were received by the lady of the house who seemed to know him well from long ago, and this revives a shared past between them. And when they offered to help him against the enemies, she showed that she was ready to fight, but Tarawi refused and said that she couldn't participate with them, and that made. There were question marks about the lady's abilities. And when I confronted him about his frequent outings to look for the leader of the dead, he remained silent. And he hit his goal, and in the tents was one of the dead who used lizard skin as a perfume, and he was caring for the body. The son of Kiza, and he was looking at him with admiration. Strange, as if he sees beauty in death, and this shows how distorted the thinking of these creatures is. And at the same moment Essus, who was arrested. So he took him, Lakiza, and one of his men. The commander searched his clothes thoroughly until he found an old, tattered map, but it could still be read because it shows the place they are looking for. And when they knew their destination, Kiza immediately appeared interested, as if he was about to reach his goal. And before he finished studying the map, the man who was at the front and who survived from Tarawi returned, injured and tired, bringing a head with him. The man whose beard was stitched through it on the ground, as evidence that they had been exposed. And when he told what had happened, he mentioned the hunter, and that made Kiza. He immediately recognized Tarawi and got out. Inside him was a great anger at what had happened. And his voice, without hesitation, commanded the strongest warrior he had to gather some dead bodies and bring them out. Immediately they catch the person responsible for this and demanded from them to bring him or destroy him completely, and this shows that the confrontation between the two sides is no longer there. A little while later, and after a few hours, upon returning to the lady's house, who knew, the narrator sensed that the atmosphere was calm. But this calm was broken when the lady, and the one who seems to be drunk fell before his support and gave it to her. At the moment she drinks with the animals, and in her moment of weakness, she appeared from the darkness without a voice, and he came close to attacking them, but before he touches them, head exploded with a precision bullet from a weapon. You narrate who was watching any strange movement, and after a little while it became clear that this wasn't just a single attack, and signs began to appear that the enemies were approaching the house, and that means that the group that Kiza sent arrived, indeed. He didn't waste time and prepared himself for the confrontation and went towards his opponents as if he intended to finish them off. Meanwhile, it's the house atmosphere, so he put on a scarf. The responsibility of protecting the family stood up against the followers of the dead who were trying to break into the place, and at that moment, a sandstorm began to form and grew rapidly until it covered the entire area. Visibility disappeared, and the weather became chaotic. And every movement could be the issue, and despite these circumstances, the narrator was moving amidst the imaginations. Yet the sand covers it, and he faces his enemies with deadly precision while Fa+ was struggling to prevent anyone from entering, and it started to appear that he was developing his skills, but he still had clear boundaries. And suddenly, a masked person entered the store and attacked the boy, and Fa+ tried to resist, but he got hit and injured, and he remained in a difficult situation. And when everything was about to go wrong, Rawi appeared again and made that being focus with him. A direct confrontation between them began. She was fast and strong and showed the hunter's experience, and took advantage of a place for his benefit. He managed to tie the enemy with chains hanging from the ceiling, but the weight. The creature broke the chain and both of them fell to the floor below, and there was an old forgotten guillotine. He saw and knew that this his chance, and he kept fighting until he left the enemy under. Blade, turn on the machine at the right moment. He cut off his head completely and ended the confrontation with the utmost the force, and after he made sure there was no danger, went out to see the bodies lying in the desert, but at that moment from underneath the dead rubble that was wearing an iron mask. He survived, came out, and attacked the hunter with anger and determination. And despite this threat, he stays there, and I am thinking. And before he did anything, the boy who was protecting him used a slingshot and aimed a stone precisely at the monster's head. Hit it, it fell to the ground and opened. A chance for Laro to finish him off, and that. It seems that even the most unexpected thing could change the outcome of the battle. And after the fight ended, Pallas approached. While he was trying to understand if this was the confrontation he had been waiting for with the main enemy, though. Farid felt cold and realized that he still hadn't found his true purpose, and I noticed that the young man was seriously injured. He made the tough decision and left. He drew his weapon and shot fast with fire and finished him off. And this surprised everyone who saw the situation. But he had his own logic behind it. And then afterwards, he dragged the corpse to an isolated place in the desert and placed it carefully. He sat waiting in silence for the moment when the body would start moving again. And this was a revelation. His action was not cruelty. No, it was because of his knowledge of the rules of this world. He kept watching Fa Bellows's body until he stood up. Indeed, again. But this time he was transformed. And trapped in the same circle that Saida is living. The story goes back and forth between flashbacks. The moment you tell me after I take revenge, I am surprised. One of Kiza's men went to jail and beat him. He was fatally wounded by fire, and after a few hours. In the desert, he fell off his horse and he couldn't continue. He surrendered to death, and at that moment it was his mother who. One of the consecrated sisters, I met him and he refused to let him die, and she called on an entity associated with death and asked to return her son's life. The entity. He agreed, but I asked him to go ahead. He went and he said that everyone he saw and killing them, they would come back to chase him. The woman of. Without hesitation, she gave her life as a toll for that agreement. And at that time, with the return of the master to life, the criminals who killed them also returned as dead, and they were with him. All of those he killed on his revenge journey. And in another part of the story, up the mountain that's on the map. Then he continues on his way holding Genie. Under his control and his men, they will dig to find the entrance of the Temple of the Consecrated Sisters. And after the collapse of the rocky entrance, it finally opened, and he entered the cave in. When his maid was watching him and he loved her. Jealousy at the same time, and the faces of the place appeared. Old columns with strange symbols and writings on them. In a language that no one understands. Many people try to understand it, but one of the servants managed to decode part of it. And this shows that they are getting close to something important. After that, Keith took his son's body deeper into the cave, and he was determined to reach his goal, while at the entrance, the maid stayed. She guards until Taro or you reach the place, and when she met him, she offered him an honorable duel and he agreed. Both of them chose pistols, but she betrayed. She slashed at him with a knife to gain an advantage. No, and he acted quickly, avoiding the strike, and fired with extreme precision at her head. He finished the fencing, and afterwards he climbed to the top of the mountain. And he found a dead creature tied to a stone altar, and beside it was Jenny screaming while he is attacked by another corpse, but Torai finishes him off with a single shot, and at that moment, Kiza appeared and shot him. And it hit him, and he left a weapon to fall along with the feature that remained with him. He asked to know how all he saw and killed returned, and her son. He didn't return, and before the hunter killed him, he appeared again transformed and interrupted the scene, presenting a fair duel and handed over the weapon. He came close and stopped Faraj right in front of the biggest enemy of his, and the one responsible for your loss. Narrator. You didn't respond, and he fired quickly and hit you. a patch on his forehead, leaving him to die, and in his last moments. I should understand that his son didn't return because he was already dead. Before the moment he was supposed to save him, and this truth destroyed him from inside. But it didn't change his fate, and at that moment he was drenched in proximity and held on. He took off his head and took it off hard, and closed the circle of revenge. Forever. And in the last scene he destroyed the one. What is left of your son's body because he prevents any chance of his return, and he walks while carrying the head of his enemy as a sign of victory. In the background, there is Fabulous Fatal in his form. Al-Jadid is trapped between two worlds, and he left a big mark in my gene. Whoever saw him and got close to him gently asked him to be her savior. And he left the door open for the future of those who are still living in this world, and for those whom death in it is not really the end. This is the end of the movie, and we meet in a new summary. Thank you for watching.